Imagine this. At 9 o'clock in the morning, a crypto project publishes an announcement. The project has entered a strategic relationship with a large company. The two organizations plan to explore how the project's technology might be used in a future product. At 9:05, the first summary appears. Major corporate partnership announced. By 9:15, people are calling it a major adoption event. By 9:30, large accounts are declaring that a global company has chosen the network. The token begins rising. That price movement attracts more attention, which produces more posts, more articles, more engagement, and even stronger claims. By lunchtime, the community is celebrating mass adoption, but the underlying evidence has not changed since 9 o'clock. The two organizations agreed to explore something. No product has been released. No users have arrived. No new demand has been demonstrated. The evidence stayed in the same place while the story moved for several steps forward. That distance between what the evidence supports and what the market begins to believe is where noise grows. Sometimes that noise comes from ordinary excitement. Sometimes it comes from careless repetition. And sometimes it is created deliberately when people benefit, when attention becomes urgency. Today, we are going to examine how information changes as it moves through crypto, why popularity can feel like confirmation, and how to recognize when a story is becoming louder without becoming stronger. Welcome back to CoinOps. This is episode 2 of Crypto Culture and Meme Signals. In the previous episode, we examined how attention, identity, and community participation can become genuine market forces. But attention and information are not the same thing. A claim can receive enormous attention without gaining any additional support. A fact can be completely accurate while remaining irrelevant to the question you were trying to answer. And even false information can influence price when enough people begin trading around it. That makes it signal about crowd behavior without making it evidence that the underlying claim is true. Signal versus noise is not simply a contest between truth and lies. It's the difference between information that improves the understanding and activity that merely occupies your attention. Information becomes signal only in relation to a question. If you are trying to understand whether a network is gaining long-term adoption, you might look for real users, sustained transactions, useful applications, fees, integrations, and continued development. If you are trying to understand what the market might do over the next several hours, attention, liquidity, positioning, and crowd behavior may matter more. The same announcement can carry different meaning in those two situations. Our hypothetical partnership announcement is real information. It confirms that some form of relationship exists between two organizations. If the question is whether the product has attracted corporate interest, the announcement is signal. If the question is whether that relationship has created adoption, the announcement doesn't cover it. Nothing has been adopted yet. The token's price movement is also real information. It tells us that the market reacted, but it does not tell us that the market's interpretation was correct. Price can respond to a future possibility, a misunderstanding, short-term speculation, or the expectation that other people will react. The movement is evidence of market behavior. It is not automatically evidence of technological or commercial progress. This is why clear analysis begins before you open the chart. You need to know what question you are trying to answer. Without that question, almost any fact can be presented as proof of almost any conclusion. Information often becomes more confident as it moves farther from the source. The original announcement may describe a possibility. The first summary describes a partnership. The next account describes an integration. The communities describes adoption. Each version is easier to understand and more exciting to share, but each version may also move further beyond what was actually confirmed. Uncertainty does not travel well. Words such as exploring, testing, considering, and potential gradually disappear because they weaken the emotional impact of the story. By the time the claim reaches a large audience, something that might happen has quietly become something that is already happening. The simplest way to identify that change is to trace the claim backward. Where did the word adoption first appear? Was it used by the company, the crypto project, an analyst, or an account summarizing someone else? Did the named partner confirm the announcement, or is every article pointing back to the project's own press release? When you reach the original source, compare its language with the language now circulating around it. The difference between those two versions tells you how much interpretation has been added. Primary sources are not automatically objective. Projects write announcements to present themselves favorably, and companies may emphasize potential benefits while saying very little about limitations. But the original document still establishes a boundary around what is actually claimed. It gives you something concrete to evaluate before the market's preferred interpretation takes over. As the announcement spreads, repetition begins to resemble corroboration. You see from the claim from a project account several influencers, multiple news sites, and hundreds of community members. It feels as if many independent sources have reached the same conclusion. In reality, every version may trace back to the same announcement. You do not have 20 pieces of evidence, you have one piece of evidence traveling through 20 distribution channels. This matters because repetition changes how information feels. Psychologists call this the illusory truth effect. When a statement is repeated, it often becomes easier for the brain to process, and that familiarity can make it feel more believable. Crypto compresses this process into a very short period. An announcement can be repeated thousands of times before anyone has the opportunity to test its consequences. Articles cite the announcement, accounts cite the articles, and later coverage quotes the reaction as if it were confirmation. The claim appears to have developed an entire body of support when the evidence underneath it remains unchanged. Independent confirmation requires something that does not simply repeat the original source. The company confirming the relationship would add evidence. A working product would add stronger evidence. Customers using that product would begin to demonstrate an outcome. Those developments move the underlying information forward. Another 500 posts saying mass adoption do not. When every road leads back to the same announcement, you are looking at amplification, not confirmation. Engagement can make that amplification appear even more convincing. A post receives thousands of likes. The replies are overwhelmingly positive. Large accounts agree with one another. Anyone questioning the interpretation is buried beneath enthusiastic responses. The result looks like consensus, but a timeline does not show you everyone who examined the evidence. It shows you the content that received distribution. Some of that distribution may be manufactured. Followers, views, likes, and comments can be purchased or generated through automated accounts. Communities can also coordinate reposts and replies to make a topic appear larger than it was before the campaign began. But engagement does not need to be fake to be empty. Real people can produce thousands of genuine reactions without adding any useful information. They may be celebrating, defending an investment, participating in a giveaway, repeating an inside joke, or trying to help the project trend. Those reactions tell you that the community is motivated. They do not tell you whether the original interpretation is accurate. A useful conversation usually contains some friction. People ask what the agreement covers, whether the partner confirmed it, when the product will become available, and what evidence would demonstrate actual usage. Empty engagement rewards certainty, repetition, and emotional loyalty, while questions are treated as hostility because doubt interferes with the performance of confidence. It does not mean an enthusiastic community is dishonest. It means the community has an incentive. People who own an asset naturally prefer interpretations that make the asset appear more valuable. The reaction may be sincere while still being influenced by their position. Engagement shows you that people are participating in the story. It does not prove that the story is supported. The same performance can also be built from numbers that appear objective. Noise becomes especially persuasive when it is built from accurate numbers. A project can announce that its user base increased by 300%. The percentage sounds extraordinary until you discover that the number increased from 10 users to 40. A network can process 1 million transactions, but that number means something very different when the transactions are generated by 1 million people than when they come from automated programs or an incentive campaign paying users to participate. A protocol's total value, locked, can rise because new capital entered the system. It can also rise because the market price of assets already deposited in the protocol increased. Nothing about those numbers is necessarily false. The noise enters through the conclusion the audience is encouraged to draw from. A percentage appears without its starting point. A total appears without explaining how the activity was created. A chart begins on the date that produces the most impressive shape. A comparison uses the weakest possible competitor. Manipulation often works this way. It does not invent every detail. It selects accurate details, removes the surrounding context, and allows the audience to reach an exaggerated conclusion. That same process can happen without deliberate deception. Communities repeat the interpretation that feels most important to them, and each repetition removes another qualification. Context restores those missing boundaries. It asks how a number was measured, what it is being compared with, whether participants were financially rewarded, and whether the activity continued after the promotion ended. It also asks whether the information matters over the relevant time horizon. A sudden wave of attention may be important to someone trading over several hours. That same wave may contribute almost nothing to a thesis covering several years. The data has not changed. The question, however, has. A powerful way to separate signal from noise is to stop asking how many people believe a story and begin asking what should become observable if the story is true. Let's return to the partnership announcement. If it develops into a genuine integration, the evidence should not end with the press release. The partner may publicly confirm the relationship. Development may produce a working service. Customers may begin using it. That activity may appear in transactions, fees, revenue, or another measurable result. The evidence can accumulate over time. Until then, the most accurate conclusion is limited. A relationship was announced. An integration is possible. Adoption has not been demonstrated. Those statements are less exciting than declaring mass adoption, but they preserve the difference between what happened, what might happen, and what has not happened yet. This is the habit that matters. Separate the event from its proposed consequence. A token listing is an event. New access and sustained demand would be possible consequences. A software release is an event. Developers and users adopting it would be consequences. A governance vote is an event. The resulting policy changing behavior would be the consequence. The story becomes stronger when the expected consequences begin appearing. If they never appear, the original announcements may still have been real, but the interpretation built around it was not yet supported. This also gives you a way to manage uncertainty without pretending to eliminate it. You can treat a claim as confirmed, plausible, or unverified, then change the classification when a new evidence appears. Your confidence moves because the evidence moved. It does not move merely because the market repeated the claim for another day. A useful thesis should also contain the conditions that would weaken it. If no possible evidence could change your conclusion, you are no longer evaluating information, you are protecting a belief. Signal does not always confirm what you already think. Sometimes the most important signal is the evidence that forces you to think differently. Separating signal from noise is not about becoming cynical. It is about becoming precise. The loudest story is not necessarily false. It is simply not made more accurate by becoming louder. Popularity tells you how far information traveled. Repetition tells you how frequently it appeared. Evidence tells you how strongly the conclusion is supported. Those ideas overlap, but they are not interchangeable. Signal is often quieter than noise. It may arrive as a limited statement, an incomplete data set, or a development whose consequences will take time to observe. Noise offers a more emotionally satisfying package. It tells you what happens, what it means, how you should feel, and what you should do next before the evidence has had time to catch up. The goal is not to remove uncertainty from crypto. The goal is to recognize where the evidence ends and where the story begins. When a claim starts spreading, return to its source. When it becomes popular, look for independent confirmation. When the numbers appear impressive, restore the missing comparison. And when everyone insists that something changes everything, follow the consequences and see what actually changed. The question is not whether the story became louder. The question is whether the evidence became stronger. So, if you're still building your foundation in crypto, my book, Understanding Crypto, A Clear Guide for New Investors, explains the systems, terminology, and risks without assuming you already understand the industry. In the next episode, we're going to examine how to read crypto on X. We'll break down common crypto language, engagement tactics, influencer behavior, community signals, and the way narratives move through the platform. If this episode helped you recognize where evidence ends and interpretation begins, subscribe to CoinOps and join me for the rest of crypto culture and meme signals. And let me know in the comments, what is the loudest crypto claim you have seen repeated without the evidence becoming any stronger? Stay locked.